Hi, this is Pod Save the UK. I'm Nish Kumar.
And I'm Coco Khan. Listeners, we're back after a week off. Have you missed us? And Nish, of course, we're going to talk about the big news, but did you watch the Lionesses and their stunning victory over the weekend?
Yeah, I was doing shows in Montreal, Canada, which by coincidence is exactly where I was the last time the Lionesses won the Euros final. So it seems like me watching it on a television with some confused Canadians is some sort of good luck charm.
Did you see Serena Wiegmann dancing to Burna Boy?
It was a real surprise to all of us at the victory party that happened yesterday, as we record on Wednesday. Alex Scott, the former Lioness, and the person who was presenting the sort of ceremony, announced as a surprise to Serena Wiegmann they'd brought out Burna Boy. Wiegmann loves Burna Boy.
I mean, I already had an enormous amount of respect for her anyway, obviously because of her coaching accomplishments, but you know, she knows a good tune. We respect that.
Anyways, this week, Keir Starmer opens the door to recognising Palestinian statehood, but with UNRWA declaring a famine in Gaza, does this go far enough?
And independent MP Zarah Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn's new left-wing political party is finally here. With 500,000 people already registering their interest, we'll be discussing how the move could shake up UK politics.
We'll also be speaking to suspended Labour MP Brian Leishman, who voted against the government's welfare cuts, and we'll talk about the direction of the Labour Party.
And since Palestine Action was banned as a terrorist organisation back in July, more than 100 people have been arrested across the UK in protest. We discuss the future of civil disobedience with former government lawyer and member of Defend Our Juries, Tim Crosland.
So, the news this week kicked off with Keir Starmer travelling to Scotland to meet US President Donald Trump at his luxury Turnberry golf resort before flying together to Aberdeen. The most pressing topics on Starmer's agenda were trade deals and Gaza, but in true Trump fashion, what followed was a chaotic, meandering and at times painful 90-minute press conference.
That's right, yeah. Trump didn't waste any time making Starmer super uncomfortable. The PM winced as Trump threw stink bombs at London Mayor Sadiq Khan.
A nasty person. I think he's done.
He's a friend of mine, right?
No, I think he's done a terrible job.
Let's not beat around the bush. He's just seen a man with a Muslim name. Like that's the long and short of it. I'm not sure he's got particularly strong feelings about Sadiq Khan's ULEZ policy. He's just seen a Muslim man's name and gone, I don't like him, he's a nasty person. It's both as and no more complicated than that.
Oh, goodness. Well, he was certainly pleased with Starmer's wife, Lady Victoria. She joined them on the visit. He described her as the perfect wife. How kind of him to pass judgment on this woman. Wow.
Also, as with any time Donald Trump speaks about a woman, it made every single person who heard it collectively vomit wherever they were. So look, in typical spineless style, throughout the whole press conference, Starmer didn't stand up to Trump in any substantive way. But look, his brown-nosing seems to be getting him somewhere, as the president said he would, and this is a direct quote, look at the blanket 10% tariff on most UK goods, adding, we want to make the Prime Minister happy. So the moral of all of this is, have no morals, only act in self-interest, and don't have any values. That seems to be the big lesson of the week.
But there was one topic which came up repeatedly, and that's Gaza. The UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, has said that the threshold of famine has been reached with widespread starvation and malnutrition across the war-torn enclave.
Trump vowed after the meeting that the US and allies would establish 4 centres in Gaza with no boundaries to allow more aid into the region, but declined to give further details on the proposal. However, at this press conference, Trump did say that he would not object to the UK recognising Palestinian statehood. And following an emergency cabinet meeting on Gaza on Tuesday, Starmer did that. Well, almost. Here's his statement.
I can confirm the UK will recognise the state of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
So Starmer has issued a veto to the Israelis. End the war and humanitarian crisis in Gaza, or Britain will recognise the state of Palestine in September. This marks a significant shift in the British stance on the issue after weeks of horrifying images showing people starving in Gaza. But does it go far enough?
Look, he's been under huge pressure from across the political spectrum, but obviously particularly within his own party. Over 200 MPs have signed a cross-party letter demanding that Starmer recognise Palestine as a state. Angela Rayner and Yvette Cooper are understood to be among those backing action. Obviously, there's been huge, continuous public pressure. We've seen more massive protests across the UK. Well, I guess there's two questions here. Why has it taken the Prime Minister so long to act? Are these specific images of children starving, which have horrified the entire world this week, the tipping point for him? I guess the other question is, why is there not an unconditional commitment to recognise Palestinian statehood? Why is it being used as a kind of threat to the Israeli government? I can't really follow the logic of that. Surely, if the recognition of Palestinian statehood is integral to a two-state solution, then that should be made without caveat. I can't really wrap my mind around it. It's not as if this is the only lever that the British government has to pull. You know, there could be a commitment to sanctioning the Israeli government. And I mean, that is no longer a kind of fringe position now. This week, a group of 31 high-profile Israelis, a combination of academics, artists, and public intellectuals, has actually called for what they describe as crippling sanctions to be imposed by the international community on Israel amidst the kind of continuing devastation in Gaza. I mean, these include an Academy Award-winning documentarian, Yuval Abraham, the former Israeli Attorney General, Michael Ben-Yair. This is a hugely significant moment where the call is coming, you know, from within Israel to sanction their own country. And there are levers that Starmer could pull here. And I don't fully comprehend why this is the one he's chosen to pull, which is threatening the recognition of Palestinian statehood rather than just issuing a commitment that the UK will recognise Palestine.
Right, exactly. I mean, I've got a quote here from Emily Thornberry, the Labour chair of the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, and she said, an inalienable right should not be made conditional. Can they be a state or can they not? What is this? It doesn't really make sense. And, to your point about other levers that can be pulled, as I understand it, the British military is helping the IDF with certain elements of training. That's an ongoing relationship, and that should be severed, certainly paused. There's also the question about arms and our sales of arms. I know some licenses were revoked, but some are still in play. Our hands are bloody with this. I think also it's worth saying that for the actual people on the ground, I mean, they've been so abused, so tortured, so persecuted that it's not like a switch can be flipped and then it's all okay again. It's going to take a very, very long time to make these people well again. And that's before we even think about rebuilding Gaza and, the cost of that. When you're dealing with people with acute malnutrition, they need specialized treatment. They can develop something called refeeding syndrome, which happens when you start to eat normally after periods of starvation. I think there's also a question about the long-term epigenetic consequences of this. I mean, you and I are both South Asian. I don't claim to be a geneticist, but as I understand it, lots of South Asian people experience a way that they store fat. It leads them to have conditions such as diabetes because of the Bengal famine, because of famines that happened under the British Empire. It literally physically changed our biology to store fat. We're going to see this, the legacies of this. As much as I'm happy to see Starmer being a bit strong, it feels like a drop in the ocean, really.
Yes, and I mean, there's two things that I think. One, I'm not sure that bravery and decisive leadership are two things that particularly come naturally to Keir Starmer, if I'm honest. But in this case, it would not have required. He would simply have been following what Macron said last week, because France has officially said that it will recognise Palestine as a state, making it the first G7 nation to do so. So, the other thing is, and I know that we bring this up often, but it's worth revisiting Keir Starmer's own remarks in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, where he said in an interview that Israel had the right to cut off power and water to Gaza. What I'm saying is, that kind of rhetoric has consequences. And what we're seeing in Gaza are the inevitable consequences of those kind of remarks, because it is a war crime to cut off power and water from a group of people or in a population. And Keir Starmer is, as a human rights lawyer, someone who should have known that. And those kind of words have consequences, and we are living those consequences right now. It's all well and good for world leaders to now say these images are horrifying, this should not have been allowed to happen. But this is just the inevitable consequence of the total lack of oversight and flagrant disregard for international law. So look, Trump has been causing chaos in the UK, but don't worry, he's been doing the same absolutely everywhere else.
This week on Pod Save the World, Ben and Tommy track Trump's foreign policy threats from Gaza to Ukraine, break down the latest from Southeast Asia, and unpack what the global left can learn from rising political movements abroad.
Plus, a powerful interview with 20,000 Meters to Andrivka director Mislav Chernov about documenting war on the front lines.
Listen to Pod Save the World every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, from international affairs to domestic concerns for Keir Starmer, as independent MPs Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana finally announced the launch of a new left-wing party. Here's Corbyn speaking to Channel 4 News.
This is going to be community-led, community-based, grassroots-led. This is going to be very different. And you know what? It's going to be fun.
The party does not officially have a name, but that's not holding it back. Around 500,000 people registered interest in the first 3 days. That is a huge number. For context, as of February 2025, the Labour Party had about 309,000 members, and as of July 2025, Reform UK had 228,000. The Conservatives had 123,000. Now, we are yet to see how this translates into members and, of course, votes, but there's obviously a huge appetite for change that the Labour Party, despite all its promises, is just not delivering.
The website to register your interest in the party is called yourparty.uk, which prompted many people to believe that was its name. But the idea was squashed when Sultana wrote on X, it's not called Your Party. So perhaps no one on the left works in marketing. Maybe our first action should be to try and radicalise some people in marketing to become more left-wing to help them out.
What do you think about Your Party as the name? Do you like it? You into it?
I actually got slightly confused and I thought my friend was being passive-aggressive to me because he said, I see they've announced Your Party. And I was like, is that going to dig at me?
Yeah. I honestly thought it was a really great name. I think Your Party is a great name. I just, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Like, it's...
I think it would lead to too much confusion. Personally, Zarah Sultana has suggested that the Left Party is her favourite name. That is a much clearer name than Your Party. Like, New Left or the Left Party is a much clearer name than Your Party. I don't know how wise it is to throw this open to the public. I'm all for democracy, but I also know the British public has an intrinsic need to be as stupid as possible. We could be in for a real party face situation here. Like, it could be, the party ends up being called Hand-Drawn Penis. That is also a possibility. Also, especially Corbyn throwing open the doors by saying it's going to be fun. Don't do that, Jeremy.
Yeah, exactly. You're asking for it.
Yeah, don't give the public even more excuses to behave as stupidly as possible. Listen, clearly this is an issue that I'm sure is animating a lot of you. I suspect there's quite a lot of people listening to this podcast that are one of the people that have signed up interest in this party this week. My main takeaway from watching Zarah Sultana talk about the party on Novara Media is that the Labour Party has lost one of its best communicators. And whatever this means in terms of an electoral calculus, just in the short term, Zarah Sultana is pretty visibly an incredibly talented political communicator and public speaker. And it is, in my opinion, a fairly evidently bad thing that she no longer feels that she has a home in the Labour Party.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, I want to hear from the listeners about what they want from the name. Yeah. I'm partial to a pun, but, also, what are your hopes for this party? What are your concerns about it? What's animating you? What's making you alarmed? We want to talk about it. Please let us know at psuk@reducelistening.co.uk or leave a note in the comments.
Name suggestions obviously are welcome.
I think it's a given with us that jokes are always welcome, but also, let's have some sensible analysis.
If you have joined, why have you joined? What are you hopeful about? This is obviously something that we're going to come back to repeatedly over the next few weeks as more details emerge about the party. But yeah, do get in touch.
Also, we have some exciting news. We're going to be on the tube.
Well, we're always on the tube.
Oh, as commuters.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, we're going to be on tube ads. How fun is that for Pod Save the UK's upcoming appearance at London Podcast Festival on Sunday, the 7th of September? We're really excited. Please take photos wherever you see it and send it to me.
I would open this up to the commuters of London. Graffiti the posters. Send us your most creative graffiti.
What? No.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, I'm looking forward to going around and doing a tour of the tube ads. I'm going to take a look, awkward thumbs up selfie next to each one. I hope they're in obscure places because I'm not good enough for Zone 1. I'm ready to go to Upminster. I'm ready to go to Amersham. Let's
given
do
the
it.
Ethnic demographics of different London areas, I assume they will exclusively be on tube posters in Harrow and Wembley.
They're really big in Southall. Anyway.
Listen, we'd love to tell you what's going to be in the show, but obviously we have no idea because it's a whole month away. But we can tell you for a fact that I will be there and Coco Khan is going to be there.
Yes, exactly. So the tickets are on sale now from kingsplace.co.uk. You can find a link in our show notes. But after the break, we are going to be getting a bit more serious with the former Labour MP Brian Leishman about his suspension from the party and the direction it's headed in. Pod Save the UK is brought to you by Shopify.
If you've ever shopped online, and statistically it feels impossible at this point that you haven't, you have bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know, the purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout, the one that makes buying so incredibly easy, that's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your own business.
Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started.
Shopify gives you that leg up from day dot with hundreds of beautiful, ready-to-go templates to express your brand style. And forget about the code.
Tackle those all-important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more.
Spread your brand's worth with built-in marketing and email tools to find and keep new customers.
And did we mention that iconic purple Shop Pay button that's used by millions of businesses around the world? It's why Shopify has the best converting checkout on the planet. Your customers already love it.
If you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify.
Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/PodSaveTheUK.
Go to shopify.co.uk/PodSaveTheUK.
Shopify.co.uk/PodSaveTheUK.
So, last month, a well-organised rebellion by backbench Labour MPs succeeded in forcing the government to water down its welfare bill, which was originally designed to brutally cut disability benefits. It's a week of chaos that left Starmer's authority bruised. And despite the series of concessions made, 47 Labour MPs still voted against the bill.
And this internal challenge is unlikely to be the last the government faces. In an attempt to regain some control, Starmer has since suspended 4 rebel Labour MPs and sanctioned 3 others. When it comes to suspensions, Starmer can be pretty trigger happy. In his first month in power, he suspended 7 Labour MPs for rebelling over the 2-child benefit cap.
But does this authoritarian approach to party discipline do more harm than good? And with the launch of a new left-wing political party by independent MPs, could we see more defections in the future? To give us some insight, joining us now is a Lower and Grangemouth MP, Brian Leishman. Brian was among the 4 suspended Labour MPs and now sits as an independent. He also is about to make Pod Save the UK history by being the first person we've interviewed to have a dog on his lap. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me on. And listen, Hugo, and Hugo, you might get more sense out of Hugo than me, but he is also just as red as me politics-wise as well. Being a smooth red miniature Dachshund, he is a character.
The power behind the throne.
Absolutely.
Hugo, the dog.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my place in the pack.
Left-wing dog sounds like a Tumblr from the mid-2010s.
I would love that to be in my Westminster bio, actually. Good boy.
So just to flag up for people listening or watching on YouTube, you might just occasionally hear a dog bark, but that's part of the excitement of the political interview. Brian, last time we saw you, you were actually part of the mass lobby against the disability cuts. Now, there were 47 MPs who voted against the welfare bill, but just 7 were suspended. Now, what was the reason you were given for being one of the 7 MPs given there were 47 that voted against it.
The very brief story was on the Tuesday, I'm sitting in the debating chamber in Westminster, waiting to speak in a debate about welfare and also taxation. And I got the email through requesting me to meet the Chief Whip at 12:45 the next day, immediately after PMQs. Absolutely no problem at all. Didn't know what it was about. Responded to the email. I'll see you tomorrow after PMQs. That's fine. Then by 1 o'clock the next day, I had been told I was getting a temporary suspension of the Parliamentary Labour Party Whip. The reason being was for voting against the government and breaking the whip essentially 12 times in 12 months. But also as well, some of the comments that I've made on media outlets. I write an article every 4 weeks in the Sunday Mail up here in Scotland. And also some of the TV appearances that I've made where I've been critical about the government on quite a number of topics. So I think it was a collection of things. There is going to be an investigation undertaken by the Chief and the Parliamentary Party to have a look at the amount of times I've broken the whip.
The Labour Party is in quite a precarious political position in Scotland, and the kind of movement of Labour voters to the SNP was a huge contributing factor in the elections in 2015, 2017 and 2019, and obviously last year there was a swing back to Labour from the SNP. Did you feel as a Scottish MP maybe that you were more emboldened to speak out because of Labour's precarious position in Scotland? Because I'll be honest with you, Brian, after we spoke last time, I actually said to James, as a producer on the show, I said, Brian's really emboldened to sort of and confident in the way that he speaks out against the Labour Party. And I wonder whether that's because Scottish Labour MPs feel like their position is more secure. I mean, obviously, it turns out that Keir Starmer has made the calculation that he can afford to suspend you. Are you not concerned, as somebody with a long history of being involved in the Labour Party in Scotland, that it's not a good look in that country for Starmer to be suspending Scottish Labour MPs?
Nish, you're playing chess, I'm playing Ludo. You've given me far too much credit there, but thank you so much. What I will say, Nish, is when the time comes and I'm looking for re-election, I will need an election agent. So I've got your number, and thanks for such a phenomenal build-up. I think that you made quite a few points here, but Scottish Labour, in all honesty, has been in the wilderness for quite some time. We are closing in on 2 decades of the SNP being in charge in Holyrood, and I don't think that in any country it's healthy to have one party in charge for that length of time. I think it becomes stale. I think the talent pool gets depleted. I think you do need a change. Now, I've been quite critical and say that in our first 12 months in Westminster, we've not been that, inverted commas, that change that people need. And the welfare bill proves that. But going back to kind of a Scottish Labour point of view there as well, is you have given me far too much credit there. I've spoken out, being serious about it, I've spoken out on a whole raft of issues because it's not my politics to make people poorer. And I look at it this way, as a constituency MP, if you were my constituent and you came to a surgery with me and I had voted in such a way that was going to impoverish your life or make things more difficult for you, I'd have a very, very difficult time looking you in the eye and trying to justify that. Because all I'm trying to do is to make things better for my community and my country. In all honesty, if I can borrow a soundbite the Prime Minister came away with immediately after winning the election last year, country before party. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I love the Labour Party, but the Labour Party is not politically in the place I would ideally like it to be. And I dare say we'll probably come on to a conversation about, well, I'll get a lot of people saying, well, is your home really in the Labour Party?
It's strange, I hear you speak, and I think a lot of people who have voted Labour in the past, myself included, those are the values that we think of. But there's always this question about whether the party has changed. Jeremy Corbyn, we talked about him earlier, he's starting a new party. Jeremy Corbyn was in the Labour Party for bloody ages. He was a serial rebel, that's why people liked him. Never got suspended. Tony Blair never suspended him anyway. Blair actually never suspended any MPs, really, it seems like. Starmer is quite keen on suspensions, it seems like. The Labour Party that you fell in love with, is it still there, really? Is it still the broad church?
I'm clinging on to the fact, Coco, that it is still that Labour Party. And I still think that the Labour Party is the most likely vehicle to redistribute power and wealth and opportunity for the benefit of many across society. And I think the statistic is that there was no Labour MP had the suspension between 1968 and 2024. And I think there's now been 11 of us. I don't think that that's healthy. I think what we've got to do is we've got to look at internal party democracy. And when we look at it, we can't afford, and no political party can afford to be an echo chamber. You've got to have different views within that parliamentary party, offering different viewpoints. I think that's healthy. And really, the entire Labour movement is built on that kind of consensus, that compromise. That's really what we should be doing. And you mentioned Jeremy, and I'll mention people like John McDonnell, who's also suspended. We're talking about some of the finest people in the Labour movement that have dedicated their lives to equality, to fighting racism, domestically and abroad. And I find it very, very sad that people like Jeremy are not in the Labour Party, because they represent the very best of the Labour movement, in my opinion.
We should acknowledge the fact that the backbench rebellion was to some degree successful. The government was forced to significantly water down its welfare cuts. What do you think backbenchers like yourself, who have had the whip suspended but are still sort of consider themselves to be part of the broader Labour movement, and backbenchers who are still within the Labour Party, can learn from that relative success?
I think you make a great point there, Nish, as well, and I would refer that back to Coco's question. You've teed me up nicely there for that, as well as I think when we look at it, I think it was proposed £7 billion of the cuts from welfare, which is abominable. Cutting £2 billion, in my opinion, was still the wrong move.
Yeah.
But it did show that the Parliamentary Labour Party, when it was galvanised and it had an issue to rally behind and to organise on, it could be an effective force. And it showed that it wasn't just left-wing Labour MPs. There was a lot of people across the spectrum in the Labour Party that said, this is wrong. This is not what we're about. This is not what the country needs. So it goes to show that the backbench cohort of MPs really can be that kind of moral compass and guidance that the leadership needs. And that's in my opinion, that's the role of a backbench MP, is to be vocal and to say, no, things aren't right, you're heading in the wrong direction, and to try and steer the ship and correct it.
On a political, strategic level, I guess, I just don't understand why it makes sense to suspend a load of MPs and have them, and I really do hate this phrase, you know, they always talk about like have the left in the tent pissing out rather than pissing in. I hate that phrase about the tents and pissing. Ugh, you can tell that politics was dominated by men for far too long, because that's not how women piss.
Why are you pissing in tents to begin with? Like, that is... What tent are you pissing in? Piss in the toilet. Jesus Christ.
I know. But so I don't really understand it on a sort of strategic level. And of course, now look what we see. We see a new party that has just been announced. Jeremy Corbyn is one of the leaders of it. Zarah Sultana, obviously a very big name as well.
Yep.
Also, that's a real threat, I would expect. I mean, my very first question, I have to ask you, Brian, you thinking about maybe going there?
It's the question you knew we were going to ask you. You flagged it up already.
Well, you know, firstly, let's identify Jeremy and Zarah. As a new parliamentarian, I've been in 12 months, or just over 12 months now. And what I will say is Jeremy and Zarah, on a personal level, have both been absolutely fantastic, really, really good comrades, in that they've helped show me the ropes. And because you don't get an induction pack and said, right, this is what life is like as an MP. You pretty much, you arrive, you get your pass, and you're getting told to go on with it.
But you do get a 400-page rule book, as you showed me before this interview.
I showed you that beforehand, and I probably could have done me reading it. But no, Jeremy and Zarah have both been incredibly generous with their time, and I wish them well in their new endeavour. I do. But my home is in the Labour Party. I still believe that the Labour Party, I think I've said to you guys before, it is the vehicle for social change, economic change, political change, redistribution of wealth and power for the benefit of many. I still think that the Labour Party is the most likely vehicle to achieve that. So currently I am sitting as I'm a Labour Party member, but I'm an independent MP. I do want to get the whip back, and I want to try and get the Labour Party into the positions that I really want it to be in. So no, I'm committed to the party. So yeah, there's no world exclusive for you there about me. But that's where I am anyway.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to leave this interview, Brian. We've got lots to think about. Also, thank you to Hugo, the power behind the throne.
Here he is.
There is a visible dog for listeners. There is a visible dog.
Hugo was exemplary with no barking. There will be a biscuit involved. He's earned it.
Brian, once again, thank you so much for joining us on Pod Safety UK.
Thanks for having me. We'll catch up soon. Thank you.
After the break, we'll be talking about the prescription of Palestine Action and the future of our civil liberties. Now, since the Home Office made Palestine Action a terrorist organisation on the 5th of July, over 100 people have been arrested for expressing their support of the group. As we've covered previously on PSUK, Palestine Action became the first direct action protest group to be banned under the Terrorism Act after activists from the group broke into RAF Bryce Norton and defaced 2 military aircraft with spray paint.
The decision was met with widespread outcry from civil liberty groups, cultural figures, hundreds of lawyers, and even the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk. He called the ban disproportionate and unnecessary, saying it's at odds with international law.
The Labour government's decision to ban Palestine Action is not an isolated piece of legislation. It's part of a trend that's been happening for years in Britain across different political parties that's seen the government pass increasingly stringent laws to crack down on civil disobedience, whether it's in support of Palestine or to just stop oil. Joining us now is Tim Crosland, someone who has insight on both sides of the law, practicing it and challenging it. Tim is a former government lawyer and activist with Defend Our Juries, a group supporting direct action to expose the corruption of democracy and the rule of law. Tim, welcome to PodSafe the UK.
Thank you very much. Yeah, happy to be here.
Tim, before we started this conversation, we've already had a serious chat with our producers about making sure our language in this interview does not break any laws. We are 100% reliant on your legal expertise.
Yeah.
But it's sort of an absurd state of affairs that we've even come to this point, that, you know, a podcast discussing the news in the UK is having to think very carefully and legally about how it just talks about an issue around a protest group. I mean, what's your experience been coming from your background as a lawyer for the government and now becoming a critic of its decision to prescribe Palestine Action? It does feels like a sort of strange and unexpected place that we've got ourselves into.
Yeah, it really does. Because, I mean, if you think about the substance of what we're talking about here, underlying it, the images we're all seeing on our screens coming out of Gaza, horrific things, and we wouldn't be human if we didn't want to talk about it. We wouldn't be human if we weren't asking ourselves, am I complicit in this? If I stay silent, what do I need to do to signal my refusal to be part of this? When I can see that my government or the government that's acting in our name with our taxes is supporting what's going on, is supporting the genocide, and yet we aren't able to talk about it freely. And if we do talk about it freely, and if we dare to say something like, well, if the government is continuing to allow the export of arms to Israel, knowing what those arms are being used for, well, you know, maybe I would consider doing something to stop that. Well, suddenly we are under suspicion of being a terrorist and could be arrested and could go to prison for 14 years. Yes, I mean, in answer to your question, it's quite a striking situation to be in, and it raises real questions, doesn't it, about whether we actually have a right to freedom of expression in this country, and if we don't, whether this is still a democracy.
So, acting as a human rights lawyer back in 2007, Keir Starmer actually represented one of the Fairford Five. They were a group who broke into an RAF base to damage equipment heading for Iraq. 2 of them were acquitted on the basis that their actions were a justifiable attempt to prevent war crimes. Look, you've been a former government lawyer. You've been on the inside of these decisions. What did your experience there teach you about how enforceable this stuff is?
There's a lot of fear in those buildings. People are worried about getting on the wrong side of someone in a more senior position, and there's always somebody in a more senior position. So it takes courage to speak out. But people have been speaking out. 300 civil servants just a couple of months ago said they felt what they were being asked to do by the government was inconsistent with their duty to uphold the rule of law, because they were being asked to do things in violation of international law.
Well,
Wow. But these prosecutions, these convictions, do they even ever stick?
12 months ago, I was in a similar place. It was the same time of year. And a group of people I knew very well, climate activists, had just been jailed for 5 years and for 4 years for action to try and stop the government granting new oil and gas licenses. So it's a bit difficult to say these charges never stick when we have seen peaceful protesters in another context going to prison for a long time. And at the moment, we've got there's a group of Palestine Action people, or allegedly so, the Filton 18 it's become the Filton 23. They have been in prison on remand since this time last year. They've not been convicted of anything. They've not had their trial yet. They've been kept in conditions approximate to, what somebody charged with terrorism act offences might be. They were held incommunicado, young people, a lot of them young people. And really all they've done is refuse to be bystanders to the genocide that they see playing out. So I don't want to be flippant and say this is never going to stick. We're seeing some pretty serious things sticking. I don't believe this one is going to stick, but that's another point.
Why don't you believe this one is going to stick?
Because I feel like a critical mass it's like a chorus of not just academic criticism or legal criticism. It's a chorus of mockery and defiance from the media, from civil society. I mean, you talked earlier and we were only half joking about, what can we say on this? And I think on the 5th of July, when the ban comes into force, there were a lot of journalists having these conversations with their editors. Can we even report on the protests? Can we even show those signs? But they've done it. It's been happening. And people have been writing articles in all the national papers about this. And maybe that private eye cartoon is the thing that seals it. There was a brilliant private eye cartoon, inadmissible Palestine Action, spraying paint on military planes. Admissible or permitted Palestine Action, shooting people as they queue for food.
Yeah.
I mean, not, dark, but true.
Yeah.
And then the person is actually a retired head teacher who takes a copy of that cartoon and, enlarges it, puts it on a board, and is then arrested under the Terrorism Act. And I think people watching that, observing that, feel this is sort of Big Brother.
Does that mean you have optimism in terms of this specific law and the sort of wider right to protest in the UK?
If this law doesn't take, and it's looking like it might not take, it'll be interesting to see what the High Court says just a bit later today. I think politicians are going to be really wary because they will have seen what can happen. And this would be a huge moment for Yvette Cooper. If her law, she's put a lot of political credibility on this, if it's almost sort of laughed into submission, it's not just this law, it's that whole suite of terrorism laws that have done a lot of damage to communities.
This week, Starmer's been talking about recognising Palestinian statehood. It's a conditional commitment, and we can get into that another time. But what would it actually mean for Palestinians?
It's significant if the UK is recognising Palestinian statehood. Of course it is. Don't want to downplay that. I'm not quite sure what it means if you're continuing to allow the export of F-35 fighter jet parts. You're continuing to host in this country Elbit Systems, which is the leading manufacturer and supplier of genocidal weaponry to the Israeli government. If you're still allowing that to happen, I'm not quite sure what any words really mean, because we're seeing people slaughtered now. We're seeing people gunned down as they queue for food now. So to my mind, the first thing, if you're serious about the rights of Palestinian people, which you are if you're serious about human rights generally, which you'd hope a human rights lawyer like Keir Starmer might be, the first thing is to stop that horror. The first thing is to stop the genocide. And you're not stopping the genocide if you're supporting the genocide by continuing to supply weaponry and arms and intelligence to the perpetrator of the genocide. So I guess I'm saying two things at once. Recognition of Palestinian statehood is hugely significant, hugely important, but words come easy at this moment, and we need more than that. And I think the British population sees that and recognizes that and does not want its taxes, does not want our taxes, being used to perpetrate the horrific scenes that we're witnessing, because they're not human.
Tim, we could talk about this all day, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on Pod Save the UK.
And that's it. Thanks for listening to Pod Save the UK. A reminder that you can come and see us live at our special show at London Podcast Festival on the 7th of September. Tickets on sale now. Find a link in our show notes.
Don't forget to follow at Pod Save the UK on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter, and on Blue Sky at podsavetheuk.crooked.com. And as ever, we want to hear your thoughts. Email us at psuk@reducedlistening.co.uk.
Pod Save the UK is a reduced listening production for Crooked Media.
Thanks to producers May Robson and James Tyndale and assistant producer Artemis Irvin.
Our theme music is by Vasilis Fotopoulos.
Our executive producers are Nish and Coco and Katie Long, with additional support from Ari Schwartz.
And remember to hit subscribe for new shows on Thursdays on Amazon, Spotify or Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.